When they handed me the mic at my cousin Amelia's wedding, they were expecting a sweet speech about love. The string quartet played something light. The 300 guests smiled at me, a sea of pastels and pearls. Champagne flutes were ready. My uncle, Thomas, the man who'd paid for it all, gave me a grand, generous nod from the head table. He draped his arm around my mother, Isabella. They looked like royalty. They expected fluff. They expected me to be the good, quiet daughter of a dead man, just grateful for the invitation. They received something completely different. I tapped the microphone, a little feedback echoing through the massive ballroom. I took a breath, letting the silence stretch for just a second too long. I looked right at my uncle and my mother, the architects of my ruin and the stars of my little show. "I'd like to talk about family," I began, my voice steady. "Specifically about secrets, the kind of secrets that can build an empire." A few of the polite smiles flickered. I saw my mother's hand tighten on her glass. "And I'd like to talk about my father. To explain that, I need to share how my mother and uncle, right there, took over his company. They forged his will and left me with nothing. Meanwhile, they built their lives on a mountain of lies." You could have heard a pin drop. And in the back of the room, a tiny red light on a hidden camera started to blink. The show had just begun. My father was a good man, not flashy like my Uncle Thomas. My dad built his company, Charleston Innovate, from the ground up. It was a boutique engineering firm designing specialized parts for marine tech. He loved the salt in the air, the clean lines of a blueprint, the quiet pride of making something that just worked. He had this old fountain pen, a heavy black Montblanc that he used for every big signature. He said it made contracts feel real, permanent. His life was anything but normal. He died when I was 16, a sudden, shocking heart attack that blew a hole in my life. At the funeral, Uncle Thomas was the rock. He was my mother's younger brother, and he stepped right in. He handled the funeral, the lawyers, everything. He held my mother's hand while she cried. He told me, "Don't you worry, Lily. I'll take care of you and your mom. I'll take care of the company. It's what your father would have wanted." I was just a kid, lost in grief. I believed him. My mother, Isabella, seemed to have shattered. She became a ghost in our house, letting her brother make every decision. The will reading is a blur. A stuffy office, a lawyer droning on. The gist of it was that, because I was a minor, my dad's shares in Charleston Innovate were put in a trust, and the trustees, with full control until I turned 25, were my mother and my uncle. It all sounded so responsible, so safe. The changes started slowly. That summer, they thought a structured environment would help me, so they sent me to a boarding school in New England. Home visits got shorter. My weekly calls with my mom felt strained. She was always just heading out with Thomas to a business dinner, a gallery opening, a charity gala. Their quiet life was suddenly dazzling. Meanwhile, money got tight for me. The trust paid my tuition, but my allowance was a joke. When I asked for more, my mother's voice would get thin. "Lily, you have to learn the value of $1. We're guiding the company through a tough time. Money doesn't grow on trees." And yet, a geyser of it seemed to fund their lives. A new mansion in Charleston's historic district. A summer home out on Kiowa Island. Trips to Europe. My cousin Amelia, Thomas's daughter, was driving a new Mercedes to her private high school. The breaking point came during my sophomore year of college. I was home for Christmas, and the tension in that house was thick enough to choke on. I found a draft financial report for Charleston Innovate on the study desk. The profits were staggering. I confronted them, not angry, just confused. "I don't get it," I said, holding the paper. "You told me things were tight." My uncle snatched the paper out of my hand, his charming mask finally slipping. "This is none of your business. You don't understand corporate finance." "It is my business," I shot back. "It was my father's company." That's when my mother stepped in. Her eyes, which I always thought were filled with grief, were as cold as ice. "Your father is gone," she said, her voice dripping with a poison I'd never heard. "Thomas saved this company. He saved us. All you do is take. You're so ungrateful, just like—" She cut herself off, but I knew, like my father. The argument blew up. It ended with me packing a suitcase, the same beat-up leather one my dad used for business trips. As I stood at the curb waiting for a cab, my mother stood in the doorway. She didn't cry or beg me to stay. She said, "You did this to yourself," and closed the door. For 15 years, I was all alone. I graduated from college with a mountain of student loans. I took dead-end jobs to pay my rent. I was the family outcast, their dirty little secret. I tried to believe it was my fault. But this small, cold ember of doubt wouldn't die. A small, tarnished brass key sparked my interest. I found it in an old shoebox of my dad's things. The key was tied to a faded paper tag with an address in Lisbon, Portugal. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Thick, cream-colored cardstock gold lettering. It felt weighted down by its audacity. Amelia was getting married at Charleston's top spot, and the celebration would last a week. A yacht trip, a perfume blending session, a golf tournament. It reeked of money, my father's money. That was the last straw. For years, I struggled and took care of myself. I told myself that at 25, I'd finally claim what was mine and move on. But seeing the sheer scale of the life they had stolen, laid out in gold-leaf script, it broke something in me. The grief turned into pure resolve. I wasn't waiting until I was 25. I was going to take my father's legacy back, and I was going to do it on their stage, in their spotlight. First, the key. I drained my savings and bought a ticket to Lisbon. The address led me to a dusty storage facility near the docks. The old guy at the desk barely glanced up, checked the key in his ledger, and pointed me to Unit 7B. The air inside was stale, smelling of old paper and the sea. It was filled with my dad's old stuff, books, clothes, things I thought he'd thrown out. In the back was a heavy metal footlocker labeled, "Do not open." I pried it open with a tire iron from my rental car. It was a time capsule of their betrayal. Inside were my father's real files, his copies, ledgers filled with his notes in the margins. I found a whole file on a shell company I'd never heard of, Palmetto Tide Holdings, registered in the Caymans. I noticed the pattern immediately. There were padded invoices and huge payments for consulting services to this ghost company. A lot of money left Charleston Innovate, starting just months after my dad passed away. But beneath that was something so much worse. A bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, love letters, in my mother's script to my uncle, and they weren't new. They started years before my father's death. This wasn't a case of them finding comfort in grief. It was a long, calculated affair. They hadn't just stolen his company, they had betrayed him completely. At the very bottom of the locker was a cassette tape labeled Office Line June. My dad's office had an old system that recorded calls, a feature my mother and uncle had forgotten about. I had to buy a cheap Walkman from a pawn shop. I sat in my sterile Lisbon hotel room, put on the headphones, and pressed play. First there's tape hiss, then come their hushed, ugly voices. "The will is a problem," my uncle said. "She's got the girl in there. Not by name, but the provision is clear. We can't have that." "We clean it," my mother replied, her voice chillingly practical. "We draft a new one. The signature is easy enough to replicate. I have his old letters. And his pen. We'll say he did it in his final days. Who's going to question it? He was sick." "And the girl?" Thomas asked. "We keep paying her mother. She'll stay quiet. The girl never has to know who her father is. She's a loose end, Thomas. We tie it up." The girl, my blood ran cold. I scrambled through the letters again, my hands shaking. There were mentions of a child, a secret. My father, it seemed, knew about the affair, and he had a secret of his own. The letters hinted at it, and a notarized document in the box confirmed it. My father had a daughter. He'd had a brief affair years ago after he first found out my mother was cheating. Her name was Emma. His real will, a draft of which was right there in the box, made a generous provision for her, a way to care for her without blowing up the family. The will my mother and uncle filed, the one they forged, had erased her. I didn't just have a stolen inheritance, I had a sister. Finding her was the hardest part. The payments my mother mentioned were the clue. They went to a woman in a small town in North Carolina. I drove there, my heart pounding in my chest. I found a young woman named Emma working in a library. She had my father's eyes. I didn't just dump it all on her. I bought her coffee and we just talked. She told me she was an orphan, that her mom, who passed away a few years ago, was always secretive about her father. A week later, on my cramped apartment floor, I laid it all out. The letters, the financials, and the forged will were next to the real one. I didn't play the tape for her. I couldn't, but I told her what they said. She cried for the father she never knew and the life she should have had. But then, just like me, her sadness hardened into steel. We were two strangers, bound by blood and betrayal. We knew a quiet lawsuit would get buried. They had the money to drag it out for years and bleed us dry. So we chose a different path. Not just a lawsuit, a public execution. We would destroy the one thing they cared about more than money, their reputation. The wedding wasn't just the final straw, it was the perfect stage. We pooled what little we had and hired the best forensic accounting firm we could find. We got a shark of a probate lawyer who took the case on contingency the second he saw our evidence. He's the one who came up with the plan. He said, "We don't just file a lawsuit, we detonate a bomb." For 6 months, we prepared for war. The accountants created an unbreakable chain of embezzlement. We got a handwriting expert to confirm the forgery. We tracked down the notary whose stamp was on the fake will. He was old and scared. Then our lawyer showed him proof that someone had forged his signature. After that, he agreed to sign an affidavit. We built a secure digital vault of our evidence. Every document, every bank statement, every affidavit. We hired a discreet tech company to set up a multi-camera live stream inside the ballroom. We prepared a press packet to be sent to every major news outlet, embargoed until 7:15 p.m. on the wedding night. I practiced my speech until the words weren't fire in my throat, but cold, hard steel. The day of the wedding, I put on my suit. In my pocket was my father's fountain pen. I was ready. The ballroom was a palace of white roses and crystal. It smelled of magnolias and money. At the head table, my mother and Uncle Thomas presided over it all, soaking in the admiration. They were untouchable gods in their gilded heaven, and I was the serpent, ready to burn it all down. When the planner handed me the mic, my uncle gave me that same oily, benevolent smile. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I felt this profound, terrifying calm. The lawyer's words were in my head. At 7 p.m. sharp, I file the complaint. The process servers are a block away. The stage is yours. My watch read 7:10 p.m. I started my speech. I talked about love, about family. I shared a sweet, real memory of playing with Amelia when we were kids. I saw them relax. They thought I was playing their game. My father believed in legacy, I said, my tone shifting. He believed that what you build should mean something, that your name should stand for integrity. It's a lesson I see everywhere tonight. This beautiful party, it's all part of a legacy. I paused and let my eyes sweep the head table. But legacies, like buildings, need a strong foundation. And the foundation of this family's current success is a crime. A confused murmur went through the crowd. My uncle's smile froze. My mother went white. "On the screens behind me," I announced, my voice booming in the sudden quiet, "you might see a few images that weren't in the couple's photo montage." The screens flickered. They did a side-by-side comparison. My father's real signature was next to the shaky forgery on the will. A red circle highlighted a blotch from the fountain pen where the forger had hesitated. Gasps shot through the room. "That is the will my uncle and my mother filed," I said calmly. "A forgery. The expert analysis is in the evidence packet I'm about to share." The screen changed again to a flowchart. A line from the Charleston Innovate Bank account to the Cayman Islands Shell Corporation. Another line from the Shell Corp to personal accounts belonging to Thomas and Isabella. Millions of dollars, itemized. My uncle shot to his feet, his face turning purple. "That's enough, Lily. Security." "Sit down, Thomas," I said, my voice dropping to an icy command. "The whole world is watching. We're live streaming." I pointed to a hidden camera. "Don't worry, you won't just be a social media pariah, you'll be a defendant." And then I played the tape. I held my phone to the mic. The hiss filled the room, then my mother's voice, cold and clear. "We clean it. We draft a new one. The girl never has to know who her father is." A woman in the front row let out a little scream. My cousin Amelia stared at her father, her face a mask of pure horror. My mother looked like she had seen a ghost. "The girl," I said as the audio ended. "The one my father tried to protect, the one they erased to get their money." The screens changed one last time. A giant QR code appeared. "For every guest here, for the media, for anyone watching online, this code links to a secure folder. In it you'll find everything. The forged will, the bank records, the affidavits, the full, unedited audio of my mother and uncle plotting their crime. The lawsuit was filed with the Charleston County Courthouse at 7:00 p.m. tonight. It's all public now." Right on cue, two figures appeared at the ballroom doors. They walked calmly, directly to the head table as chaos erupted around them. People were shouting, standing on chairs, and scanning the code with their phones. The process servers put the legal papers right on the table in front of my uncle and my mother. "Thomas and Isabella," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Someone has served you." I looked at the wreckage of their perfect party, but I had one last thing to do. "They tried to bury a person," I said, "but they failed. She's here tonight, she's my father's daughter, she's my sister." From a side door, Emma emerged. She walked toward me, her head high, her eyes locked on the couple who had stolen her past. She stood beside me, and I put my arm around her. "Her name is Emma," I announced, "and she is his legacy." I set my father's fountain pen on the lectern. Then, I turned away from the chaos. With my sister beside me, I walked out of the ballroom and never looked back. Strangely, the string quartet began playing again. Their frantic, messy tune clashed with the sound of sirens getting closer. The aftermath was a tidal wave. The media dubbed it the wedding toast takedown. By morning, it was everywhere. Our evidence folder was downloaded thousands of times. My uncle and mother were publicly disgraced. The financial fallout was swift and brutal. The board of Charleston Innovate called an emergency meeting. Faced with proof of embezzlement and catastrophic PR, the company's lenders froze their credit lines. The business was paralyzed. The legal battle was long and vicious, just like our lawyer said it would be, but they were fighting from a hole they couldn't climb out of. The tape and the documents were just too damning. Their allies in Charleston vanished. They were radioactive. We had the truth, and our lawyer successfully petitioned the court to freeze their assets, so for the first time, we had the resources to fight. It took over a year, but we won. Completely. The court stripped control of Charleston Innovate from them. The forged will was thrown out, and my father's real wishes were honored. They had to pay back every cent they stole, with interest. The house, the summer home, the cars, all of it was sold off. Emma and I took control of Charleston Innovate. We're rebuilding it now, based on our father's real vision, integrity and quality. It's hard. The family I knew is gone, replaced by headlines and legal documents. I lost my mother that night. Amelia, caught in the crossfire, divorced her husband and moved away, crushed by the shame. Sometimes, the sheer brutality of what I did settles on me in the quiet hours. But then I'll look at Emma, sketching a new design in our father's old office, and I know I did the right thing. We gave a ghost her name back. We're forging a new legacy from the truth. Justice doesn't always bring peace, and it doesn't heal every wound, but it clears the ground. And for the first time in a very long time, we have solid ground to build on. It's a strange thing to destroy your family to save it, but the family I have now with my sister is more real than the glittering lie I blew up at that wedding. So, I have to ask, what would you have done? Would you have waited, or would you have lit the match? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of justice and revenge. Thanks for listening.